Hello, everybody. It's Wolfgang. I wanted to talk about becoming successful through grinding repetition. So when you hear people say they're in grinding mode, this is kind of what they mean. When you're grinding away at something, you're sticking to some idea that you had, some success you wanted to achieve. It's very difficult, though. And I will go through and I'll explain why it's difficult to be successful, but how you can reframe it so that you can become successful, even though it's not the easiest thing to do. It's not that easy to become a standout. It's not that easy to be better than the next guy at something. But there is a method that very few people talk about. The most successful people almost never talk about this. It's sort of a hidden secret. And part of the reason is once you hear it, it's counterintuitive as to why it works, but it does work. So I'm going to disclose what that is in this video. So here's what I used to think about grinding repetition, repeating the same thing over and over again. As an example, my first career, I was a guitar player in rock bands. Practicing the guitar over and over and over was not that easy to do. Because you're practicing scales, sort of over and over and over, and there's not a lot of intellectual stimulation after you do it a few times. It just seems like the same thing over and over. So it's boring. This is what I used to think about repetition. It's boring. There's no novelty. There's no variety. It's just the same thing over and over. And if you've ever thought about working on an assembly line, or if you've actually worked on an assembly line, you're doing the same thing for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. There used to be people in this country who did that before, for example, automobile manufacturing, before robots were introduced to assemble cars, people made all the cars. And working on an assembly line meant showing up for work, doing the same thing over and over and over every day for all week, for all month, for years, for 20 years in some cases, for some people. So doing the same thing over and over, it doesn't feel right because in our minds, we always think, if I want to improve, I'm going to have to change because the way I am now is not at a high level. We always look at our current situation and we think this is not a high level of success, or at least it's not the highest level of success that I want, so I have to change. And so improving, we always think, if I'm going to improve, I have to change, right? And the answer is maybe not. This instinct that you have to change, it can be wrong. Practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect. So I'm going to disclose in this video what the secret is to becoming successful. One of the wealthiest guys on the planet, I'll use him as an example, uses this technique, all right? So here's the problem. At the root of the problem as to why people find it hard to become successful or even to be better than the next guy is because humans love variety and novelty. So every year, retailers cannot sell last year's clothes. Car dealers cannot sell last year's car model. People who buy iPhones, they're not going to keep buying the same iPhone over and over and over, right? And why not? Because if you think about it, last year's clothes, they fit fine. They did what they're supposed to do, covers up. Last year's car drove fine if they kept producing the same model. Back in 1908, when the Ford Model T came out, that car could have been improved and we'd still be driving it. And the iPhone does not need to be changed every few years or so, every 18 months or whatever the cycle is, because last year's iPhone worked fine. So we'd still be driving the 1908 Model T Ford, and we'd still be wearing 200-year-old clothing. But the problem is humans love variety and novelty. It's fun to buy stuff. It's fun to buy new stuff. It introduces novelty and change in our lives, and humans thrive on that. You're not going to watch the same movie over and over and over again, right? When new movies come out, that's a draw. Otherwise, we'd still be watching movies from the 1930s and 40s over and over and over again. You couldn't do it. Humans love variety and change and novelty. That's the problem. So in society, we change apartments. Even though the previous apartment may have been fine, we just want something new. We change jobs because we think greener pastures, right? We think the next job will be better, even though maybe the current job is fine, just not exactly, maybe it's dull and boring. So we're always changing things that really don't need to be changed. And so the truth about grinding repetition, and this is kind of the secret. The best tennis stars, the best golfers, the best musicians, they play more tennis, they play more golf, and so on than the next guy. That's the secret. They simply put up with sameness, grinding repetition. The key to success is developing a tolerance for grinding repetition. That is the secret to success. You can get lucky and become successful through luck, but that's very rare. Most of the time, people decide they want to be successful and they start working on it, and they work on it for a long time before they become successful. So most successful people do not talk about this. As an example, if you think of the top basketball players or tennis stars, when they're interviewed, they don't say anything like, by the way, I played tennis for 70 hours last week, and the week before that I played 70 hours of tennis. They don't disclose it. First, because people wouldn't believe it. For some reason, a lot of people think highly accomplished people just are that way. That's something that they possess, some sort of unique quality about them that makes them better than the next guy. And the truth is, no, they just tolerate grinding repetition. They do the same thing over and over and over. And they don't talk about it. They rarely mention that, Michael Jordan one time brought this up. He actually did, the famous basketball player, Michael Jordan. He said something along the lines of, people think I'm a great player, but they don't see the years that I spent in practice trying to build up to this level. So he's one of the few people who actually talk about it. So this is how you become successful. So, just knowing that you have to accept grinding repetition as a price to pay to be successful, it's not enough. You have to realize and accept that if you're tolerant for sameness and grinding repetition, you can become an expert and use that to motivate you. In other words, if you find yourself whining about your activity on any particular day by saying, I did the same thing yesterday. So if you find yourself in that frame of mind, just remember you can motivate yourself by saying, yes, but this is the key to achieving greatness in this. As an example, most of us know, or a lot of people know, that Warren Buffett reads a lot of annual reports. In fact, one of his main activities when he goes into his office, he goes into his office and he reads the annual reports of companies. If you've ever read annual reports, it's a pretty dry thing. There's not a lot of intellectual stimulation leaping off the page at you. It's basically numbers and descriptions of what a particular business did over the most recent period. And yet he has done that for decades. Daily, he does that over and over and over and over again. And he develops a keen sense of what to look for to figure out if a business is on the right track or not by reading all those reports. Over time, he has read so many annual reports and quarterly reports, and he's been able to watch the companies he's read about to see if what he read in their annual report led them to success or failure. So that wisdom is not something he could have picked up by reading one annual report. He had to read annual reports over and over and over again until he got to the point where he could say to himself, 20 years ago, I was reading annual reports and quarterly reports about, General Electric. And how are they doing today? And so what does that tell me about that particular annual report? And he can use that to filter other companies to decide if they're going to become successful, to predict whether or not other companies are going to be successful. Grinding repetition, if you can imagine sort of an assembly line mentality, I'm going to go to my office, and for the next several hours, I'm going to read annual and quarterly reports of companies. If you can imagine doing that, that's a difficult thing. It's one thing to do it for one day, but to do it for many years, a long stretch of years, not that easy. It's a pretty dry thing to read a bunch of numbers and descriptions of businesses, but that's how he became an expert. So you have to use this fact to be able to tolerate the grinding repetition. If you say to yourself, I want to be successful, I am willing to pay a price, this is the freaking price. Most of the time, you have to develop a skill over a long period of time. There's a saying that once you've spent 10,000 hours doing something, you're on the right track. I think it's more than that. I don't think 10,000 hours is enough for some topics, for some things. I think you need more than that. But that's a pretty conventional thought pattern that you spend 10,000 hours repeating something, and you start achieving a high level of skill at it. But if you just want to be better than the next guy, then all you have to do is play more tennis, play more golf, or read more annual reports than the next guy. You don't have to copy the top players or the top professionals in a field. But if you're at work and you're trying to advance, you don't have to be the best person in the industry, but you can be better than the next guy, and that can set you apart. That can make you a distinctive person so that you can get promoted. And once you get promoted, you learn more. The more you get promoted, you see how the company works at higher and higher levels. So that's sort of the secret. People who are successful tolerate grinding repetition. They are willing to pay the price of no variety and no novelty. Not a lot of variety, not a lot of novelty. I still play guitar every day. That was my first career. I still like the instrument. And the thing about physical activity and mental activity is if you don't rehearse it, if you don't repeat it, it starts to fade away. For example, if you took math in school, if you took calculus, differential equations, I had an engineering undergrad, a lot of that stuff, unless I rehearse it, it sort of slips away, it fades away, and I have to refresh my memory. The same is true with playing a musical instrument. Even though at one point you can say I had a high level of skill, if you don't rehearse it, if you don't repeat it, grinding repetition, it starts to fade away. So it's a mental thing and a physical thing. So keep that in mind. If you want to be successful, the secret is tolerance for sameness. Saying to yourself, I know I like variety, I know I like novelty, but if I want to get good at something, I have to do something that most people won't do, and that is to put up with grinding repetition, to repeat something over and over and over again. Just think of Warren Buffett. The guy's worth over $100 billion, reading annual reports, making good decisions because he's read a lot of them. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, you can post in the comments, and I will try to answer them. And I want to thank everyone for watching, and have a great day.